The Flight Deck is Leduc's executive sports bar. Bring the guys, catch all the big games, and enjoy the best food and drink service from the flight crew. The Flight Deck is your UFC destination. Showing UFC 126, middleweight champion Anderson Silva faces off against former light heavyweight champ Vitor Belfort. Free hot appetizer buffet with paid admission. Come celebrate the 10th anniversary of The Flight Deck. 8450 Sparrow Drive, Leduc.
Hey, this is former Maine Black Bear Jimmy Howard.
Marlowe to the front. It's finished up. What a save by Howard on Malhotra.
You're listening to The Pipeline Show
with Dean Millard and Guy Fleming.
Head to thepipelineshow.com. You can keep up to date on our contests. We will have some contests heading towards the National Hockey League draft, as we do each and every year, and probably maybe a Frozen Four contest. Maybe if Guy ends up going to the Frozen Four, your prize package will get to be able to hang out with Guy for 4 or 5 days.
What a prize.
We'll easily get 2 entries for that.
Yeah, you're one.
And your wife, then she gets a free trip.
Yeah, that's right. Finally gets to go on a vacation. Woo-hoo! Hi, dear, we're going to Minnesota.
We get to watch hockey for 4 days. Let's bring on Dan Salos now, courtesy of the Saturday Morning Samuel Adams Hotline. Dan is a guy who has a pretty cool website, really informative if you're definitely into hockey prospects as we are. Dan, welcome to the program. How are things in Vernon today?
It is clear and cold, and definitely the doldrums of winter are upon us.
Well, it's a good time to sit in and watch hockey then. Maybe
for sure.
For our listeners, can you just explain a little bit about, where they can find your information? And I don't know if I want to call you a scout per se or an information guy, but maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself.
For sure. My site is dansalos.com, and it is a scouting site, but it also has like articles featuring NHL information and interviews with the players, up-and-coming players, and prospects as well. It's something that I got started just because I had seen a few players here that went through the Bantam draft and didn't get picked up, and I felt that they deserved a better fate. So I ended up putting a couple player profiles on there, and those kids got scholarships, and then a couple of them ended up in the WHL program. So it snowballed from there, basically, and I just kept rolling with it.
Dan, before the last commercial break, we had an email that came in and asked us about Ryan Strome and why he isn't getting kind of tossed into that top 5 kind of conversation when he's basically the same height, same weight as Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and is outscoring Nugent-Hopkins right now in the Ontario Hockey League. And obviously Dean and I are out here. We're based in Edmonton. You're in Vernon, BC. I don't know how much you've got to see of Strome. We haven't seen him a whole lot, so we're trying to pick some brains and really get a good read on him. So in your opinion, from what you've seen, maybe tell us about Ryan Strome and why he's not getting talked about as top 5 material.
I wonder if maybe some of that has to do because he kind of struggled for early parts of the year last year and in Barrie, and when he got moved to Niagara, he kind of kicked into another gear. He's a decent-sized kid with excellent vision, good hockey sense, has a really good shot with a quick release, strong two-way player. I think he's a player that's going to move up, and you'll see him maybe go in the top 20. A lot of great players that I've seen in this draft seem to have been kind of misranked, in my opinion. Like Matt Pumpel's another one who he was like 29th overall, I think, in the Central Scouting draft, and he's got a lot to give. I think he's kind of like a Jeff Skinner type that could move up as well. So, the position that they have on these kids right now, you can't hold any bar with that because they are going to move up and jump up at season's end, So I see Strome going in the top 20 for sure once all's said and done. I think this draft, comparable to other drafts in recent history, they doesn't have that overall number 1 pick guy like the Halls and the Stamkos and the Tavares, the last 3. So I think it's deeper. So it's kind of hard to pick where guys are going to go right now. It's anywhere from the top, 10 players to the one selected in the 3rd round could jump up and down where we go on in the rest of the season here.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Guy and I were talking about how wide open this is.
Last
year we had a promotion here in Edmonton because obviously we're in Edmonton and they had the first overall pick, and it was the Northlands Park 2-horse race because the horse racing facility in town sponsored it, and it was really a 2-horse race between Hall and Sagan. And I look at your mock draft that you did halfway through the year, and Larson you have going number 1, Couturier 2, Ryan Murphy 3, then Landeskog, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is coming in at 6 on that mock draft. And like we said, it's going to take a certain team to take a certain player, no matter who, whether if it's a team that needs a defenseman that has size, maybe they look at Dougie Hamilton in the top 5. If there's a guy that wants skill and Larson's gone, then you're right, Ryan Murphy. Or, there is such a wide open race right now that it's really hard to predict. And I think that might mean that there might be less movement at the draft because teams are going to say, well, who knows if this guy is going to be taken? He might be available, but there's a similar player to this. Exactly. I think it makes it a better draft. I think it means there's better overall talent.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, since I did that mock draft, Nugent-Hopkins has been on a tear. Ever since the CHL Prospects game, I think he's been making a push similar to what Hall did last year at the later part of the season to be like the number 1 guy. And what he had 12 points in 3 games last week. He's been off the charts with his play of late, and he reminds me of a kid that's a throwback to the 80s players, like the Gretzkys, the Yzermans, the Denny Savards, with the way he can distribute the puck and elude defenders at full speed. Like, he's an unbelievably gifted kid that we're going to see in the NHL in the near future and be racking up points for sure.
Dan, you're in Vernon, so you're obviously watching the BCHL a lot.
Yep.
Is there a kid in the BCHL that might be under the radar that you think can really kind of become some sort of sleeper? And Destry Strait is the name I get given to me the most, but is it him or is there someone else out there?
For me, watching the BCHL this year, Destry Strait is kind of the guy. I don't think there's really a sleeper that's going to come out of there this year. It doesn't have the Bo Bennett or anyone that's of significance, kind of that type of a player, So it's a little bit of a different year in the BCHL this year. It's not really the top Junior A league in Canada this year. You look at the World Junior A Championship, and a lot of the teams, like the players from the Western team, were out of the AJHL, the Alberta League this year. So it isn't a particularly strong year in the BCHL this year.
But it's interesting. Guy and I were talking earlier about how Kyle Turris came out 3rd overall out of the BCHL, and then you had Joe Colburn and Dylan Olsen, and you had Bo Bennett last year. It's like these two leagues between the BC and the AJHL are playing ping pong with who's going to have a first-round pick. It doesn't seem like there is one this year, but any reason why these two leagues seem to be providing the best high-end talent out of junior A hockey in Canada?
That is something I'm not too sure of as well. I mean, you look at the OJHL. I find the OJHL is an older league for the junior A's, and maybe that has something to do with it. Guys are coming into the BCJHL and the AJHL at a younger age and developing quicker. So maybe that's kind of where you're seeing the trend go for like those two leagues, being the top 2 leagues in the junior A rankings. But that being said, too, there's some good players in the junior A ranks in Ontario. They actually finished 2nd in the World Junior A Challenge, that Team Ontario. So they've got some high end caliber kids as well. They're just older, and I think that's where the difference might range between the leagues.
Dan, is there one player that you're thinking of right now that, and listen, this answer might make you look like a genius, so definitely think about it, but is there one guy that you think is going to catch people off guard, maybe the Thomas Hickey of this year's draft, where really we didn't think he was going to go 4th overall? And even last year, I know the Oilers were working hard to move back up into the draft and get a guy like Ryan Johansson, but I don't think many people expected Johansson and Niederreiter to go that early. Is there a guy that you're thinking of this year that people are going to say, wow, I didn't think he'd be a first rounder, or I didn't think he'd go that high? That's maybe a bit of a sleeper.
Thomas Jerko seems to be a name that keeps popping up, and I didn't even include him in my mock draft, but he's been on a tear lately as well. And that St. John Sea Dogs team, they've been ranked, number 1 in the CHL for I think the last couple months now. and they've got so many talented kids. There's the Huberdeaus and the Belows and Zach Phillips is another good one. So, but I think Jerko, like, he's got the talent that he creates every time he's on the ice. He's almost Pavel Bure, like, with the way he can, like, control the game and seems to bring the fans out of their seats anytime he's got the puck. So, he's a player that you could see maybe sneak in there. But then again, it's such a wide open draft this year. I mean, you touched on Dougie Hamilton as well. I think he's a player that could end up in the top 4 as well.
Dan, I want to ask you who you think the top defenseman coming out of the WHL is this year. You've got some interesting guys. Duncan Siemens is, according to most people, probably the guy. But Joe Morrow in Portland is a guy I hear often mentioned in that regard as well. And then you've got Weatherspoon in Portland and Miles Bell in Regina. And there's lots of guys, defensemen available this year out of the WHL. Who do you think is the cream of the crop, though? David Musil in Vancouver, another one. I
think Siemens and Musil are. I got the chance to see Morrow and Witherspoon from Portland just recently, actually, and those two do everything well, and they don't have any weak points in their game. But I think when you talk about elite level defensemen in the WHL, I think for sure it's Siemens and Musil that stand out to me the most, just with their size and what they bring to the ice. I think the knock on Musil is he isn't overly physical for his size, but he does get engaged physically when need be. But Siemens, to me, I think he edges out Musil with what he brings. I think he just has that ability to, control games at the back end there, and that's another position here. I think this draft is stocked with such high-end defensemen, and you look at the way the game's changed and how these young kids are coming into the NHL and making an impact right away. Mm-hmm. It never used to be like that, but now you see like Fowler making a big impact in Anaheim, and Tyler Myers and Hedman. The list goes on and on with these kids that are coming straight out of junior and making it at a position that used to be the toughest position to break into in the NHL. So I think you see guys like Siemens who he definitely has a chance to make it at that next level, like right away next year. And Hamilton, again, I think he's probably going to step into the NHL and play at least the first 10 games next year. I mean, they seem to be breeding high-end, top-caliber defensemen nowadays.
Dan, good stuff. Where do fans go to find your website and all the info that you have there?
It's www.dansalas.com, and it's something that I'll be continuing to do. It's a free site, and hopefully fans enjoy it.
Great stuff, Dan. We'll hook up with you again down the road.
All right, thank you for having me.
That was Dan Salas. You can go check out his website, and he's got a plethora of information there. When we come back in 3 minutes' time, we'll be speaking with John Keane, the voice of the Kamloops Blazers. But between now and then, here is Matt Awanek.
Hi, it's Kellen Tochkin, the Everett Silvertips. You're listening to The Pipeline Show on the Team 1260.
With Dean Millard and Guy Fleming.
What's going on?
It's a computer network, sir. Our system has crashed and our website needs upgrading. We can't take much more than this.
Fascinating. Logic would dictate. We don't have time for your logic. What should we do?
I'm a doctor, not an IT expert. Call DLM.
DLM Consulting does it all. Networking, video conferencing, website design, custom application development, and tech support. DLM Consulting. Reliable, affordable IT peace of mind. Online at dlm.ca or call Kevin at 960-7311.